Okay, guys, I'm going to talk about NPC stuff again, and I have a lot more information now because I just watched a couple of videos. Apparently, this is kind of getting big again because this guy Ryan Langdon made a video where he interviewed his friend who has the NPC brain, what we would call the lack of inner monologue, I guess you would say, where they don't receive concepts visually when they read, or when you think. You don't have mental concepts, you just have it. It's like, she says she has like this word structure, and then words have shapes. I don't know what she's talking about. I mean, you always hear about word structure in English class. We're talking about like verb, noun, agreement, and like prepositional phrases and all the rules and stuff involving sentences. But when you're coming up with things to say, like if you're giving a speech like I'm doing right now, you have to think of the words in your brain. Oh, also, you may have noticed when I was just thinking that, I probably looked up and to the left or up and to the right, which they say it means you're either thinking of a lie if you're looking one way, or you're trying to remember a memory if you're looking the other way. So I don't know if that works the same with people that have this, or I think I've figured it out to an extent, because I think it may have something to do with the hemispheres of the brain, or the same thing with left-handedness. Let me get into this. Okay. So I would recommend you go watch this video by Ryan Langdon where he's interviewing his girlfriend. There was one like on a website that was shortened, but watch the full video. And then also watch this video by Magic Turtle 643. I'll put these in the description. It's called My Girlfriend Has No Inner Monologue or Mind's Eye. She also has this thing called aphantasia, where she can't remember faces. Like, she doesn't know what her mom looks like unless she's looking at her mom. She knows like she has brown hair and brown eyes, but she doesn't know what her face looks like until she's looking at it, because it's not stored in her memory anywhere. That's a totally different thing. But she was also talking about how like she thought animals would have thoughts the same as her, because they may do, because she's thinking non-visually and without this inner monologue. And animals, maybe they think the same way that animals do, these people. So I've always been kind of, I've talked about it before, like I think like 80% of the world is kind of like background characters, and maybe like only 20% of us are like real and have real effects, and everybody else is just kind of filler. And that might be true, or it might just be like, it seems, although like he's interviewing this this Asian girl, I forgot her name, the Ryan Langdon guy, and she seems like super smart. And like they're talking about how when they're taking a test, he's on like question 2 and she's already finished the test. Like when she hears information, she hears it as words, and she files it away in like filing cabinets, or like in File Explorer and Windows Explorer or whatever, so she can pull the information to the front when it's needed. This is really similar to eidetic memory, or that one where you can remember, like somebody tells you a date, like 1980 May 3rd, you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing every hour of the day. There's like a really rare people that are able to do that. One of them is the woman from Cheers. So I'm getting into some sidetracks here, but like they may be smarter like on one level, but dumber on like a conceptual level of being able to come up with new ideas. But they can remember old ideas, old information they've already been given, but they can't come up with new concepts. So I wrote down all these questions of things I was coming up with when I was watching these videos, and one of them was like the way we think. I'm assuming you're all with me on this, that we all have inner monologues. When we see somebody walking by and we have a thought about a person, we have a visual thoughts in our head, we're talking to ourselves about what just happened, or we probably make a lot of judgments. Like we're really judgmental. Like we might see a black guy and we'll make immediate judgments, and then we'll filter out what's acceptable, or we will repress things that we know to be wrong instantly, so that like we don't make faux pas in society. So we're like constantly judging everything, and we're filtering it for appropriateness. And like when I started making videos and I realized what was funny is when you turned off that filter, you just say whatever's in your head, and usually it's fucking funny and people appreciate it because you're being honest. So being inappropriate seems to be hilarious. But another question I was having is like that show The Mentalist. He was talking about a memory palace, how he remembers things as he envisions like a house, and different memories he stores in different rooms, and he has like an object in the room that relates to that memory, so it has a connection to something else. So if he needs to remember something, he'll remember the thing in the room, and he remembers what room it's in, he remembers memory, or something like that. So this girl he was talking about, he was interviewing, she was saying she's really fast at like reading books. She's a speed reader. But she's probably not comprehending as much. But if she was given a test about the book, she would probably be really good at it or really fast with it. But like when I'm reading a book, like she's the other video. See, I'm watching 2 different videos. So this other girl, she says she prefers nonfiction over fiction because if she's reading a fiction book, it's hard for her to imagine what's going on in the book. And like the other girl, the Asian girl, she says she doesn't visualize the setting when she's reading fiction. So she's not seeing it. She's just reading the words, and she's forming these concept maps, which is probably similar to the map I did of like the Joe Rogan podcasts and the connections, like memory maps. Yeah, it's like a memory map of concepts. I don't think I would enjoy that as much though, because you're not actually watching, you're not reading for entertainment if you're not seeing it in your head like a movie, because you're not. See, that's what makes reading fun to me, is it's like I'm escaping to a place in my head and watching a movie when it looks like I'm just sitting here reading a book, which is cool. I really wonder how these people will be with like math and geometry. Because like I was really good at geometry because it's like visual. You can imagine like intersecting lines. Of course, the opposite angles are congruent and whatever, and shapes and things like that. But like math, they would probably be better at the math part because it's remembering the rules and remembering like multiplication tables, memorizing stuff like that. But that's pretty crazy. So what else? I really want the left-handedness thing. Here's where I was thinking. I was thinking about the ratios of people that have this. I think he said like 89 people didn't and like 19 people did. So I thought it was like an 80-20 split. That's a little bit similar to that. I wonder what is the ratio of left-handed people? Of left-handedness. Okay, so 10% of people are lefties. Okay. So let's take all left-handed people are NPCs. They don't have an inner monologue. That would make a lot of sense. But I'm guessing it's a mix. My question was like, what percentage of serial killers don't have an inner monologue? Because if you're with somebody, you're less likely to commit a crime because there's a witness. And even though you're by yourself and you have an inner monologue, nobody's with you, but you have like a consciousness inside your head, so it makes you feel less likely to do something bad, if that makes sense. So I wish we could get like a count of like ask every serial killer like if he has an inner monologue and see what they say. Or what if it's like a percentage, like in order to be a serial killer you have to be left-handed, and then you have to be like a subset of left-handed people that have no inner monologue, and maybe like 2 or 3 other things. I don't know what, like probably like 0.01% of people are serial killers, but like we could figure out like what makes people serial killers, and we could like find them easier maybe using this. I don't know. So the next thing on my list is like songs getting stuck in their head. A lot of people ask the question like if they can get songs stuck in their head, and she said she could. This is the second video girl. And she would use that, like if she had to memorize something, she would say it out loud to herself a bunch of times. Then that would get stuck in her head, and she would be able to remember the way she said it or something like that. Or I don't know why songs work, because if they are seeing or they're hearing the words in their head, but it has to be in a song form. So maybe music has something to do with like getting around this weird loophole in their way their brain works or something. And another thing I thought of was like introvertedness, because like my mom and dad are always like telling me I don't talk enough, and like maybe they don't have an inner monologue, because like whenever I hear stuff, people are having conversations, I'm like kind of having the conversation too, but in my head. I'm not saying it out loud, so people think that I'm really quiet and I don't talk much. You wouldn't know that from like the 900 videos I've made on YouTube. But like I'm just sitting here by myself thinking about stuff all the time. Like I don't have to say everything that I think in my head. So it's like I'm just as talkative, but like non-extrovertedly. So maybe you also need to be an introvert to be a serial killer. So maybe I've got one of those boxes ticked. I don't know. I went over the animals thing. Okay, the other thing was the Ramachandran experiment. I don't know if you guys know about this, but I talked about it like when I made my atheist videos. So your brain has the left and the right hemisphere, right? And it has this little tube connecting it like this. Corpus callosum, it's called. So in this experiment, he cut this tube. So now you have two separate hemispheres of your brain, right? So like one hemisphere controls your mouth and it can talk. The other one controls your hands and it can like type out answers. So they asked the one side, or they asked both of them, I guess, like, do you believe in God? One of them said no, and one of them typed out yes. So like different sides of his brain had different beliefs. So it's almost like you've made two souls, or you're split a person into two souls. So how does that fucking work? Like what? Like it's the same with the left-handedness, right? Because you got right and left hemisphere dominantness too, right? Like isn't like one hemisphere is dominant? Like people that are more artsy or liberal or like all of that is like one hemisphere, and the other hemisphere is people that are more like fact-based and more like mathematical and literal. So maybe that factors into this whole fucking thing too, dude. So, the other thing, how does everybody dream? Because people have different ways you dream. Like you see stuff, but then some people don't see stuff. They just kind of have concepts. I think I'm more of a conceptual dreamer. Like I won't actually see stuff most of the time. But then sometimes I do. Maybe it just like, I forget about it so fast that I don't remember what I saw. But I remember the concept. Maybe the concept lasts longer in your brain, like in your memory, or your short-term memory. Because like dreams are fleeting. I think your dreams, like, since the part of your brain that's asleep controls your long-term memory, you still have your short-term memory there, and it's like that's all it can use or something. That's why it disappears so fast. Because it's like dumping your RAM in a computer or something. Another question I had for people that have no inner monologue is, wouldn't they be more susceptible to propaganda? Because if you're just taking in things like people say stuff to you, this is where the whole NPC meme comes from. It's like people that are anti-Trump, they just hear people saying Trump's bad, Orange Man bad, and they repeat it back to them. So like, wouldn't you be more susceptible to that kind of thing? Like if I tell you something like a cult or something, like if I tell you something's true and you're not visualizing whether it makes sense or not, you're just like taking the words in as fact, wouldn't you be like less able to discern people that are lying if you're just taking in thoughts that way? As long as the sentence structure makes sense and the sentence looks good to your sentence shape or whatever, like it seems like you would just believe anything. And that's why people are like easily hypnotized. Certain people are easily hypnotized and other ones aren't. But another big question, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about in this video. How did it go on so long where people didn't realize this was a thing? Because people always said stuff like, picture this. Like the people that don't have an inner monologue, like, what do you mean picture this? You can't picture things in your brain. What are you talking about? Why didn't they ask any questions about that? This kind of goes along with the propaganda thing. Like maybe they're not thinking about stuff. They're thinking, but they're not thinking. They're just like remembering the words that they heard, but they're not like thinking about the consequences of the things that they were told. So like if you're reading like an Archie comic or a Garfield, for example, there's a lot of like little thought bubbles, like a little doot 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 doot. Here's a guy thinking about something, like a picture or words. Like what did they think that was? There's thought bubbles in cartoons. They never asked the question, like, what does that mean? Like, for all this time, they didn't realize it was possible to think in your head? Or I guess they're thinking it's just like thinking of the things from their filing cabinet or something. Like, they still say that they think all the time. They're just not visualizing it. Man, I don't understand this. This is weird. If I come up with some more stuff, I'll let you guys know. But I hope that Ryan Langdon guy sees this. I want to talk to him about this. We need to figure this out.